So today we are going to go over some of, we have two iterations of fund times, right? So funds stands for Fellowship Understanding Network Development, and support is the whole program. But I guess the support didn't make it into funds times, now that I think of it. But this particular iteration, we're going to talk about support and training for your fellowship application. So our agenda today is we're checking in, which we already did, and now we're going to move into some intention setting and forecasting. So what we're doing today is we are getting acquainted with some of the resources. We're talking about how to kind of identify funding sources, what applications kind of look like on the whole, because obviously each funding opportunity is going to have its own requirements. We're going to talk about planning mechanisms, how long you should allocate in terms of your private life to apply for these, where you can identify other support mechanisms in addition to the people in this room, and then what that application process is actually going to look like. My goal is for you to walk out of here today with 2 funding sources that you have identified as something that you want to pursue. We're in kind of a weird cycle because a lot of the funding is either due in January or in September, October, but that's not a hard and fast for everything. That's mostly for some of the major like national and international awards, but there are other additional awards that we can look at that may be, quote, smaller, but just as impactful to your bottom line. So we're going to be doing that, and then we're talking about pivot. Is anybody with us for the last one? No, you can come in, you're good. So wherever you want, it's totally fine. So we're going to talk about pivot and how to use that, and it's free to you. So it's a really incredible resource. It's an awesome database. We're also going to look at the graduate school and OSFIA websites, so you can kind of orient yourself to those. The graduate school website is undergoing a bit of a facelift, which is exciting because we're starting to use a little bit more of a user-centered approach and trying to figure out, curate really what is helpful to students and to faculty and to staff, prospective students, current students, and trying to figure out what might be of better help. So we're going to look at those under the guise that things are changing. And then we will move into planning and application components. And then you're going to have a solid chunk of time today to actually workshop on your own. We can help you, but also it's just some time for you to kind of identify. You can go out there and use computers, you can bring them with you, you can stay in here, but for you to really kind of use Pivot. So we're kind of scaffolding what we're doing so that when we get to workshop time, you can figure out what's going to work best for you. And then obviously we will bring in some of the folks from the Writing Center, introduce them towards the end, and we will potentially, my hope is to log an NOI or 2, which is a notice of intent to apply, and I'll show you how to do that. And that will also kind of trigger the support mechanisms that we have in place here at the university for your application process. Does anybody have any questions? And for those of you who are online, you have a question?
No, I was online. I come downstairs. I was in the 4th floor.
Oh,
Because I didn't know it was here in the library.
oh.
I was in the Union Building and I was like, oh, I'm late. So I went to my box and I was connected, but I can listen. The audio was really. So I asked through the email, hey, where are you? Okay.
Oh, so are you not able to hear me on the?
Yeah, but maybe what is my computer?
Okay. Can anybody who's online, can you put in the chat whether or not there's like 12 notes in the chat? I don't know if that's, but everybody's good? Nobody's having an issue? Hearing me? No one has reported any issues. Excellent. Well, at any point, we're monitoring the chat. We're obviously in here. I'm happy to answer any questions. I also have my card and some PDFs and some handouts, which we will also distribute after the fact as well, in addition to the slides. So at any point you have any questions, I want this to be more conversational. I mean, I will present information, but it's meant to be interactive What do you need? Okay, so when we talk about external funding mechanisms, we have two different types of funding that's really available to you. We have internal and external. Internal means inside the university. So funding that comes through your program or comes through the graduate school or other types of funding that would be delivered to you from the university proper. External funding is really what we're focusing on today, which means outside of the university. And you have 4 places that you can go and you can look for things like this. And so right now we're going to look at some of them. So the graduate school website, which
Hello.
I realize I have to stop share because I have.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
I wanted to record a session, so am I permitted to record?
It's already being recorded, and then it will be made available to you. Is that okay?
All right. All right.
Excellent. So when you go,
How do I get the flyers at the end of the session? Do you have soft copies?
I'm sorry, can you I didn't hear you.
How do I get the flyers? You said you'd be sharing flyers at the end of the session, so how could I get the flyers?
So we will send them out via email.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, of course. So this is the external funding page, and again, it's going to start to look a little different. We did update it here, but you have some of the bigger awards that are listed here, and when you click on them, they have a bit of a call out. This is going to change a bit, especially because most of these are not, international students aren't necessarily eligible for them. However, this right here, the University of Illinois funding database is really, really incredible. So if you click on it and you go to it, it will bring up this really incredible interactive table. And down the left-hand side, it is very easily curatable. So you can click on international students for those of you who are international, and you can click the stage of study. So if you are in dissertation research, or if you're finishing, or you're about to graduate and you need to figure out what kind of fellowships might be available to you, you can curate right by that. You can also curate by award type. So if it's something you want to do in the short term versus something that's going to be like 1 or 2 years, you can choose that. And then you can also choose, so you would probably not choose all because you're also not University of Illinois students, but say you are female, you might want to choose women or underrepresented students. And when you click on it, when you click search, it will curate what is available to you. And then you can, these are all hyperlinked. It gives you some kind of rudimentary metrics here. So the amount and the deadline. When it says anticipated, it means that the call for those applications has not yet been published, but it's typically published, and then applications are accepted in November. That's what that anticipated date looks like. So if you find a funding opportunity that you're interested in that says anticipated, definitely you can start applying. And by start applying, I mean doing your application process, going through the process, but you won't be submitting anything until they tell you that it's time. So that's one of the things that we have available on the grad school website. Additionally, UCLA has one. CONACYT is for Mexican research. However, it's not currently open, and we don't know when it will open. But if and when it does, we will probably blast that out in a very excited email from the graduate school. We'll be like, woohoo, CONACYT, apply. But right now we're like, oh, CONACYT, can't apply. Wow. And then we have some other things that are going to be curated as well. And then additionally, ORSP has, and these will all be in the PDF, the slides that I send out, but ORSP is the Office of Research and Sponsored Projects. So this particular department helps a lot with bringing money into the university. It's more program and faculty centered, but it is also helpful for students. So if you see, The graduate professional development team offers workshops. There's all sorts of stuff that is available to you. There's also foundation directories online. Sometimes they will post, like they keep current solicitations up to date and things of that nature. And they have a list of federal agencies, state agencies, other funding, and some of it won't apply to you, but some of it might. So if you get bored one day, instead of scrolling through Twitter, maybe you scroll through ORSP. I don't know what you like to do with your time. I like to find money. So there's that. And then this is Jen's stuff. Jen, do you want to talk about this at all?
Sure. Okay, so the one bummer about the opportunities that I work with, the vast majority do require US citizenship. In a lot of cases, that money is coming from the US government. Sadly, their rules, not mine. I always want to specify that. A lot of the opportunities that I work with would be things that you'd be applying for as an undergraduate in hopes of funding your graduate education. There's a few exceptions. I'm looking for set exceptions. I mean,
Which one are you looking
really
for?
the areas of
GRFP?
synergy between my office and the graduate school are going to be the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. Again, that one, you have to be a US citizen or permanent resident, designed upon your first 3 years of graduate school. And then another area where I collaborate with the graduate school in particular is the Fulbright US Student Program, which can be an amazing vehicle for graduate students to do dissertation research overseas or thesis research overseas or teach overseas. There are opportunities to teach English, and you don't necessarily have to come from a typical like English or TESOL background. They're interested in a lot of different perspectives, but Fulbright is even narrower in terms of the citizenship requirement than the NSF. Again, a government agency is coming from the Department of State, so they do require US citizenship. And for anybody who's interested in Fulbright, I did a big information session on that yesterday, wherein we had a Fulbright representative from their New York office talk to UTEP students. But those are going to be the big areas of synergy. A lot of these other ones, like Marshall McLuhan Rhodes, those would be things that you could apply for as an undergraduate in terms of funding graduate school. And then another potential area of overlap that I was going to talk about is the Boren Fellowship. Another super, super cool way to do dissertation research abroad. In particular, they are like the most desirable projects are going to be ones that incorporate a critical language, i.e. a language critical to US national security. These all tend to be less commonly taught languages as well. So that's extra special fabulous in the eyes of Boren. A couple of programs that I wanted to put a plug in for real quick that I don't work with this directly, but Luciano and I will be collaborating, I suspect. The American Association of University Women has awards for folks with US citizenship who identify as female, as well as awards for international students. Now, the only tricky thing about the awards for international students, they do have a clause in there about how you would need to be willing to go back to your home country for a couple of years and like spread the love and do good in the community. For some students, that's a deal breaker. For some students, it's not. But the AUW is an amazing organization, that supports women and girls. Your dissertation research, it's a dissertation writing award, so it's for a little bit later in your career. But your research doesn't necessarily have to focus on women and girls. However, whatever your dissertation research is, you do need to show that you're involved in activities in the community, at the campus level, what have you, that support women and girls. That is a deal breaker. If you don't have that piece, you will not get the award because that is their mission. And just a reminder, Luciano's tell you to look at these databases and like really pay attention to the mission of the award. And if you need to go look at their website to do a little more research, do it. I mean, I'm probably jumping ahead, but AUW is just a really good example of that. And then sadly, Mellon ACLS, which is an amazing dissertation writing award, has gone the way of the dinosaur. But Mellon ACLS now has an award for innovation in dissertation writing and well, not just writing, but in dissertation innovation. And I believe they will consider applications from international.
They
students
will,
as well.
yes.
So sorry, I just want to give a shout out to those because I used to work with them in my previous role and I won't be as much, but my heart hurts to say goodbye to those. So I just have to name check them.
So I'm going to share this again. Okay, so that's the OSFA website, and then we're gonna go to Pivot in just one moment.
Which is the
So,
greatest thing in
isn't
the
it? Isn't it
universe.
the best thing ever?
Yes,
I love
everybody
it.
pay attention for Pivot.
Okay, so I heart Pivot, and why you should too.
I heard it too. Oh,
Isn't it the best?
it's so
Everybody's like,
amazing.
what is this? This is like the gold, it's the golden ticket.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so, all right. I like Pivot for many reasons. So just to work through the content of the slide before I start clicking on links, I have to stop, share, reshare, all that. And I'm very sorry to those of you who are online. I know it's clunky and I'm very sorry, but there's so many different ways to interface with the information on Pivot. And so in the email that I sent out on, I believe it was Monday or Tuesday, I asked you to create a Pivot profile, right? There's a reason I asked you to do that, is because the more and more you work on it, the more and more Pivot works for you, right? So the more you consider who you are and what is of interest to you and what your fields of research and your community involvement and your affiliations are, the more Pivot's algorithm will match funding opportunities to you, for you, and curate them for you. Like, here you go, here's everything that you could potentially apply for. And when I'm talking about it works for you, like it really does work for you. It will even email you and say, hey, guess what? Luciana, who is a humanitarian and a female and a mom, I don't know, I'm just picking.
And a humanist.
And a humanist, yes. Guess what? And this new money just popped up. Let me email it to you to your inbox and I'll tell you when it's due. And I'll tell you, what you have to do for it. And I'm like, oh, sweet, I like money. So then, it is a really quite, once you learn how to use it, and it's very user friendly, but once you learn how to use it, you're going to wonder why you didn't know about this or how you lived so long without knowing about Pivot. So there's that. And there's lots of different ways for you to view the funding opportunities that come to you. And it's not just funding opportunities, it's also professional development opportunities. So things like conferences, publications, things like that. So that's on there as well. And it adds, and when you apply for funding, you're going to add that to your profile as well, which we'll get into in just a little bit. And that will help you to continue to return other places that might be interested in giving you money. Okay, so stop share. All right. All right, share screen. Wonder if I could just share the desktop, or will that be like Inception?
I think you could do it.
Wow.
It might still be like Inception, but I think you could do it.
Okay, I don't want to share this though. Okay, Jesse, what are you seeing right now?
I'm seeing Pivot.
All righty. Okay, so this is what I like to call the wheel of positionality. It's like the wheel of fortune. It's actually, that's what I should call it. It's the wheel of fortune. So up here, much like,
Maximize the screen for the online viewer.
oh yeah, sure.
It would be only a little bigger than a little bit easier.
Would love to do that, except it's like, no. Oh, is that better?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay, I can also zoom in. Is that better?
Great.
Okay, cool. So you can use this handy dandy up here. You can search just like you would search for an article or a book. You can type in keywords, right? Or this is even more fun, I think, because who doesn't like a game, right? So there's this wheel. And each one of these slivers represents a different positionality in terms of field of study. right? And so it's telling us right now that 96.05 billion dollars are available.
My Twitter twice with that one.
You could, you could.
Too soon.
But if you, so each one of these then, so when you roll your cursor over it, so if you're in health and medicine, we'll say, all right, then you can, so that's more of like a broad strokes field, right? Oh, let's go to arts and humanities because there's always less funding in arts. and humanities. But right now it's telling me there's $12.82 billion. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so much money. I could do so many things with that. I could not buy Twitter. I could buy maybe something significant.
By
like
MySpace.
MySpace, yes, maybe. And then you just keep going, right? So, all right, I am, oh, food, no, food, what?
Can I
History.
just tell you, I've never experimented with the wheel in all my years.
Really? It's so much fun. Okay, so
The advanced
here's,
search is my jam.
here's me, language and literature, all right? That now, okay, so now we're at 387 million. Now we're gonna keep going. Nope, I'm not European, really. Arts, planning, architectural, something or other. I don't know. All right, well, we'll just pretend. I can find the other one back again here. Restoration, where did it go? All right, here we go. So we're now we're searching. We're searching, y'all. Okay, so it has spit back 770 results. Much like the other database that I just showed you, it has kind of this left side menu, right? So it's telling you citizenship, and you can change this just by clicking on it, right? So I removed US citizenship. I think I did. I tried to. I don't see it. Applicant types, all of these things. Oh, currency. Country or funder, like maybe you're like, you know what? Australia is cool to watch in rugby, but I really don't want their money. So maybe you don't want their money. So maybe you don't want, you want to sort by, you want to take Australia out of the mix. But the cool thing about this is that when you have a pivot profile, oh, clearly I've done this before on this computer. Enhance. Okay. When you have a pivot profile and you build it out, right? And we're gonna talk about that. I sent you a worksheet yesterday, which I also have in paper form today. Once you build it out as much as you possibly can, it will tell you there are 16 funding opportunities that match me. So I'm going to click on that. Look at this. This is amazing. 16. They just curated these for me because based on my profile alone. And now I can pick from these if I want to. I actually did apply for some of these. I think about that. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can use pivot, and we're going to experiment with that a little bit more later. But you can also do it by keyword. Jen likes to use the advanced search. So if we go home.
Oh, okay, but caveat, don't get too crazy with the keywords because you're going to limit your options so drastically. So for example, I was working with a biomedical engineering student who typed in like biomedical engineering, breast cancer, specific, CRISPR, like all these different methods he was using. And he's like, Jen, I only got 2 results. And I'm like, yes. Because personally, I'd rather get too much than too little and have to sift through it. It's like you said, like, instead of doom scrolling, go in and like start going through these and see if they're who you're looking for, if you're who they're looking for. You know, once you've kind of whittled down your list, like go out and look at their websites and see what their mission is and double check all the eligibility. But so I actually tell students not to put anything in keyword, but that's just me.
Well, it
And then-
depends. So
You're absolutely right.
so when I use the advanced search, I use this more for international students.
Yep.
Because if you scroll down, like obviously the top part here is keywords. You can add more rows if you want, but you can also do all sorts of things like what kind of funders are you looking for? Are you looking for a location? But this is the one that I use most. So it says citizenship. And you can select your country. All right, so we'll say I'm from Chile. And I'm also from Costa Rica. I don't know. And so we want to include these. Funding type. Then you can ask, it can ask you for, so dissertation and thesis, right? Because that's where I am. In my degree plan, I'm also one of your peers. I'm a PhD student as well. Yeah, and so then I'll search now. We'll see what comes up. Ooh, 225 for people who are citizens of the United States, Chile, or Costa Rica. All right, so or United States are unrestricted, right? And so now this particular American Academy or Academy of American Franciscan History, we'll just click on this really quick so I can show you what a call out looks like. Again, it says application anticipated. So when it gives you the full details, this is going to be really helpful to you because it brings you to their website. It also shows you information about the funder. So it's going to bring you to the actual application call website or the place where you can find about this specific funding opportunity. And then it gives you information about the funder themselves. And then it gives you kind of a flash of what's going on here, right? So you can be a citizen of Central America, North America, or South America. It gives you an abstract, right? It gives you a little bit about eligibility, although I always prod students to go to the actual website and check eligibility because sometimes they tweak them from season to season. And what is on Pivot, it didn't necessarily get changed. So it's always best to double check. Okay. And then it'll tell you sometimes how many funding sessions or seasons they have a year. This one is only once. And then it's telling you that it's anticipated to be due on February 1st of 2023. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So this is Pivot, and this is how we like to do that. And then, okay, so to build your profile, you're going to want, for those of you who are online, if you can pull up the worksheet that I sent you yesterday. So positionality worksheet.
Yeah, we got a worksheet.
You did? Okay, so we're gonna work on that now. Do you want this?
Sure.
You already have one?
No.
Oh, here you go. And we're gonna work through it together a little bit. Because this is the information you're going to want to put in your Pivot profile. So what I ended up doing is kind of going through the Pivot profile and working through creating a box for each one. So this is just, I mean, I work better on actual paper, but I did send it as both a Word document and a PDF just in case you want to type it in. That's perfectly fine. However you want to do it, do whatever is comfortable for you. So obviously you need to know your role as a student and professional. That includes, are you a research assistant? Do you tutor? Are you a TA or an assistant instructor or whatever it is that you do as both a professional? Maybe you work outside of here. Maybe you coach soccer. I don't know. They want to know about your roles. If you have, and some of the stuff you may not have. If you have a website, if you have an ORCID ID or ORC ID, if you have an ISNI, If you have a Web of Science research writing, I do not have one of those because I don't work in the realm of science, but some of you may. And even if you don't have that now, doesn't mean you never will. And that's okay. But the more information, again, the more information you put in there, the more it will do for you. So if you have, I have an ORC ID. And so by having my ORC ID on there, the algorithm is able to see what I've already published. And so it's able to say like, oh, okay, well, she publishes in technical communication. There's a fellowship for technical communicators. Cool. Maybe she would be interested in that. I really don't know that the algorithm talks like that, but that's the way I anthropomorphize that. Your fields of expertise. What are you studying? Have you ever published on anything? Has there been a class that you presented on something? So maybe you're in a methods class and you were asked to present in class on a project, or you had a project. I would include that in your expertise if it's something that you enjoyed and something that you feel comfortable with. You don't necessarily have to have a degree in everything to have that as your field of expertise. So that's important too, especially because multidisciplinary work is very exciting, and it's also a really great way to broaden your funding resources. Your academic and social interests, obviously that's pretty cut and dry. And your institutional affiliations, what does that actually mean? Well, you have one, UTEP, but where else have you gone to school? Have you worked at any other institutions? Have you worked in public service? So make sure that you're putting all of that, any place that you've worked, studied, have you gone to a conference anywhere else? That could also help widen your scope. And then, of course, your education and degrees. So if you have a master's, obviously everybody here has at least a bachelor's. Please make sure that you put that down. And then on the back side of page 2, which is not featured on this slide, but for those of you following along from online, if you can scroll down into the PDF or the Word document, you have keywords, right? So my keywords are things like rhetoric, composition, because I'm getting a PhD in rhetoric and composition, writing studies, technical communication, kind of broadening my field and putting more vocabulary and framing kind of what I do and where I do it and what field I do it. So keywords would be like, I also do community engaged research. So that's a method that I use. So community engaged research or qualitative versus I use qualitative methods instead of quantitative methods. So those are some of those keywords. But again, like Jen was saying, you don't want to make it so specific that you get one thing and maybe that one thing it doesn't end up working for you. But that's a way for you to kind of narrow things down, is to use keywords. Do you have proficiency in a language? Do you have conversational proficiency?
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh.
Is your Siri yelling at you?
Yeah, you're rude. Sorry, Siri. I apologize. That was crazy. Where was I? Oh my gosh. Oh, languages. Yeah, you guys can come in. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Oh. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
It's fine. It's all right, Farida. So any languages that you speak or are proficient in, even at a conversational level, you can put on there, because again, maybe it's the Fulbright and you decide, you know what, I'm conversationally proficient in French. Maybe there's an opportunity. Now, again, you're gonna have to check the eligibility, because a lot of times if there's a language proficiency requirement, they're going to tell you, like, you have to be fluent, or you have to have taken the TESOL, or you know, whatever.
Yeah, and with Fulbright, it depends on the country. It's really funny you said Fulbright, and it was like Pavlovia, my head went. But yeah, but you'd also be surprised with Fulbright how many don't require language.
Right.
But if you do have that in your arsenal,
familiarity.
yeah, if you have that, use it.
So that's important as well. Associations, professional and personal. So do you have Are you part of a student group here on campus? Are you part of, are there any academic journals that you are subscribed to? And a lot of times those have associations that go along with them. For instance, wait, do we have a question? Somebody unmute?
No, yeah.
Oh, what's up?
Oh, no, I don't have a question.
Oh, okay, all right. I just want to make sure I'm being mindful that there are people in the room who are in the room. Okay, so any sort of associations, that's super important as well. And those can be community associations. So those are not limited necessarily to academic or professional associations. But you're gonna want to put those. Have you won any honors? Do you have any previous publications? Did you help write something? Are you a contributor, listed as a contributor anywhere? And again, if you don't have these now, doesn't mean you never will. It's okay. Have you won any other grants or fellowships? Awards also is included in that. Do you have any patents? I definitely do not have any patents, but now that I know that this is a thing on Pivot, I kind of want one. I don't know what I would patent. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty cool. And professional aspirations. So what is it that you want to do? Are you looking for something in academia? This will help it curate your professional, what it fits back in terms of professional development, not necessarily just funding. But are you looking to go into academia? Are you looking to go into industry? Are you looking to go into consulting? Do you want to do government work? What is it that you think that you might be interested in? What do you think you might want to do with your degree? Don't limit yourself there, because you never know. You never know. You might want to go into administration, higher ed administration. Vaya con Dios, by the way, if that's what you want to do. That means go with God.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And then you want to put down your citizenship. If you have permanent status, if you have dual citizenship, things like that. And then it sometimes is helpful specifically for women to have gender identification. It's not necessarily a hard and fast that you have to disclose that. And some people are not, they don't feel comfortable doing that, and that's okay. But the reason I have that listed there is because, especially if you are a woman, there are sometimes like women in STEM, or AAUW is only women, right? So that sometimes will help you kind of curate those resources. It's on the second page, all the way at the bottom. On the back. Oh, that's just, I think at the very beginning. Does it not tell you, not say male or female?
Would that be?
Or yeah, prefers not to disclose.
I'm following your thing and I'm going down.
Oh, yeah.
There's like an edit thing.
You can also curate it down the left-hand side, and you can hit like underrepresented, or you can click women, and you can click on it. So it will, we will get there. When during workshop time, let me take a look at it. All right, so then here are some of your resources, specifically, that's me on the left-hand side. And then the University Writing Center is where we are physically right now. They have graduate writing fellows here, and they are ready to help with your application process, but really with the components of the application, right? So they are not necessarily equipped to sit and scroll through Pivot with you. However, once you have identified funding sources and you're working on some of your components like the narrative, budget justification, asking for letters of recommendation, they can help you craft those pieces. Additionally, I have one of the librarians who we've been working with, her name is Les Arms. She's really proficient in Pivot. I have her card if you want, and I have all of that to pass out to you today. For those of you who are online, you can always shoot me an email. Any of the librarians can help with Pivot, but again, Les Arms is the, actually Jesse, if you want to. Les is, yeah, you can just pop that in the chat. Okay,
That's all.
does anybody have any questions about what we've done thus far?
I have a question, but about the previous issue when.
Yeah.
When, before we get into Pivot, you show us some databases.
Yes.
There is one at UTEP. I don't have my computer now open, but I remember maybe through Synapses, so I get into some database, but there was a lot of, like, there were no criteria to. I mean, the UTEP has also
Yeah,
database. Why you didn't recommend that one?
because we are kind of going through a facelift process of our website. And so the ones that we use specifically are the ones that I showed you, the University of Illinois one, and we use Pivot with our students because those are really well done. And they're more far reaching. And specifically for international students, we're in the process of designing a little bit more specific resources for
Yeah.
international students. And that's going to be coming out. We're rolling that out very soon. And we're probably going to really showcase that at next week's event, which is called Money Talks. And that's for international students
Yeah.
specifically. So the reason I'm not touting that is because I don't want to say, oh, hey, use this thing. Oh, then it's changed.
Okay.
So I'm trying to give you things that are a little bit more evergreen and what's going to be available to you regardless of what we do with our website. So that's why. Is that an appropriate answer?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are your next steps? So now we've made a pivot profile. Yay. So we're inputting the stuff that's on the web, the worksheet into your pivot profile, which is great. You're going to log your NOI with the graduate school. So you're going to you're making a list of your funding opportunities and you're going to log your NOI. And NOI is a notice of intent. It's a notice of intent to apply. So how do we do that? Well, we click on this and it takes us to the notice of intent question pro. So we'll pretend, all right? And you can go through this. It's going to ask you for your student information. It'll ask you for your college and degree, who your faculty mentor is. So if you do not have one at the time that you start to apply, just use whoever your advisor is so that they have visibility on the fact that you're applying for something. And then I'm just going to continue without answering. And then you're going to tell us about the funding opportunity. So what is it? And if there's an ID number, sometimes there's an ID number on Pivot. If not, it's okay. You don't have to say anything about it. Or if you know the funding agency is Fulbright and the opportunity is the US Scholars Program, student program, there's that. See, this is why I have a counterpart. And then you tell us when the application is due. Sometimes the opportunities will require a letter, but that's not that often. And then if there's any additional comments, like this is my first time applying for anything like this, I really would benefit from more support, or I won this award in the past, or I applied for it and I didn't get it the last time, so I'm reapplying. Anything that you can give us that will help you, because what this is going to do is this is going to tell us, oh, hey, this student is applying for this thing, help support them. So that's where we kind of come into connection with you, and we can kind of help give you some more resources and more support as you're going through the process. You can attend a funding application workshop, like one like this. We'll also have different ones throughout the year. We're trying to establish a little bit more of a footprint in terms of that type of support. Then you're going to make an application timeline plan, which I have here, and I also have on the next slide. You're welcome. Huh? Oh yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. So we're going to go through that together. Then you're going to write your application components. You're going to revise. That's super important. Revising. Submit, receive your award, and then you're going to report your award, which is another question pro that helps us track. Oh, hey, this student applied for this and it was so great, they got it, now let's shout it from the rooftops, okay? So it's another very quick question pro that says who you are, what you won, when you won it, and yeah, that's about it. Okay, so, yeah, of course.
Do you have to have, if you have a mentor, do you have to have a mentor's permission to do this analysis?
No.
There's a support first before you actually.
I mean, you probably should let them know, but we're gonna get to that right now. But you should probably let them know that you're applying for external funding, but I can't imagine they're gonna say no.
No, I mean, like,
Oh.
because I know for several things, you said, well, in the system, when you go in, it has to have your mentor's support or a letter or.
You don't have to fill that out, but if you don't have, so some people are just starting out in their program and they don't have like that one-to-one mentorship yet, but they have an advisor, because everybody is given an advisor by default. So if you don't have a one-to-one mentorship, but you have the name of your advisor, you can put that in there. What it does is it just helps us kind of create a little bit more of a, if you think of it like a hug, right? So we're hugging you from the graduate school on this side, and your faculty is hugging you from the other side. So then that way you have, at every turn, you have somebody there to support you. But yes, definitely, I mean, let them know, hey, I found these funding opportunities, I'd like to apply for them. Is it okay if I use your name? But I don't know of anybody who would say no.
And basically, it's a team effort, right?
Yeah.
Like the graduate school and your advisor, like one is not a substitute for the other, because I think the graduate school is going to come at this more in terms of strategy, in terms of the focus of the individual awards, and then also obviously how to like search for opportunities in the first place. Whereas your advisor is usually going to be the most focused on your research essay. I think the graduate school could also, I'm just going to volunteer, Luciana, be a great resource as far as personal statements.
Yeah.
A lot of times advisors are not as comfortable with that as they are with the research essay.
Yeah, I mean, and there's lots of different components. Some funding opportunities require a lot more writing than others. And so our main goal is that you feel supported in any way that you possibly.
Also require 2-3 letters of reference.
Yes, and we're getting there.
To be asking your mentor every time, oh, what this letter, it's.
That's also their job though. Like when you take on a student, you're taking that on. You don't want to be, you want to be intentional about how you go about it. Like I think it's not like you're going to apply for everything you see, right? But if you narrow it down to 4 or 5 things that you're really interested in, no, obviously you still want to be respectful. You want to give them, a fair amount of notice, etc. But that is partly what they sign on for when they take a student on.
It's true.
It's a thing, it's an expectation. But that being said, and I bet Luciana's about to talk about this, there are ways to go about it and ways to not go about
Yes,
it.
we're gonna get there.
Yes.
So fellowship application schedule. So this is kind of, if you do your due diligence consistently in looking for funding, you can really, it can turn into something that is not as stressful as it would be if you left, if you only had like 2 weeks to apply, because again, a lot of these opportunities involve multiple components, tons of support structures, you need to ask for things and what have you. So I've kind of broken it up in 6 months all the way through. Now, do you have to, if you find one today and you're like, oh my gosh, this is due in 4 months. Oh, well, guess I can't apply, it's not 6 months. No, but a lot of times if you know the seasons of applications, you can start to kind of understand like, okay, a lot of things are due either in the fall or right after the first of the year. A lot of them are. So like we looked at that one and it said expected February 1st of 2023. All right, well, it is, what is it, May? Almost May. So for me, if I wanted to apply for that, well, now I have it on my radar and I can start to think about what I'm gonna have to put together. So each one of these boxes by timeline lets you know kind of what you should be doing. And it's breaking it up into manageable chunks so that you are not emailing your faculty advisor and going, I need a letter of recommendations tomorrow. Like, that's not gonna happen, right? So it also helps you to be respectful in terms of asking for help and for other people's time. I would identify your faculty mentor, probably about 4 months out and make sure that they're on board, as well as, because then you should be consistently updating them on where you are in the application process. You're also going to want to ask for letters of recommendation or support, probably about 3 months out, because faculty, just like you've indicated, they get asked a lot, right? Which means, could mean that they may be able to, do it, or they may not. Also could mean that the more lead time that they have, the better. Like, oh yeah, okay, I can do it, but I can't do it until next month because I'm so busy. So if you ask them 3 months out, it gives them a lot of extra time. You're also gonna wanna make sure that you're giving them any sort of information, which we're gonna talk about how to ask for letters of recommendation, but it kind of also breaks down your revision cycle. So you're gonna want to plan out your written components. Is it a research statement? Is it a budget narrative? Like, what is it that you need to write? Start small, kind of framing things, outline things, and then continue to build it out. And then every time you build it out, bring it to the writing center, have somebody look at it. You're gonna meet with me. You're gonna meet with your faculty mentor, because you're gonna get all of this feedback, and it's just going to make your packet stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. If you try to sit down and write this stuff and then send it in like that, you're really not doing yourself much good, because you have all these resources that stand ready to help you. All right, as you can see, when do I have a submit application? A week before it's due, right? So you want to make sure that you are submitting your application not the night before, because that's when technical difficulties happen. That's when your internet goes out. That's when their server is going to crash because so many other people are doing the exact same thing you are. You want to make sure you're building in that extra time so that all of the elements of your application are submitted on time and in the proper format, and they actually are received. So I'm big on that. Plus, when you get to coast, right? You're like, yeah, I sent this thing in. Woo! I'm gonna have a Coca-Cola to celebrate for your drink of choice. Also, after you submit your application, it's really helpful to write thank you notes to your faculty mentor and anybody else who wrote you letters of recommendation. It's also more likely that they will help support you again in the future if you know that you are appreciative of their support. Does anybody have any questions? We're almost to workshop time, I promise. Okay, so what are some of the common funding application components? So sometime before you even start to apply, this is some of the stuff that you should really, on the left, you should prepare the following. So your supervising faculty information. So again, if you don't have a faculty mentor, it's going to be your advisor. But like you said, reach out. Hey, I'm applying for this thing. Can I use you as, can I put your name down? Letters of recommendation or support. Sometimes it's just one, sometimes it's 3. It just depends. And then sometimes if you're applying for a grant, there'll be an ask amount. If it's a research grant and you say, all right, I'm doing this research project, I know I need $1,250 because you have a budget put together. Sometimes with a fellowship, it's a flat amount because it's usually meant to kind of fund not only your education, but kind of what you should be doing living wise during that time. If you have any other additional funding applications that are out or pending review, you need to disclose that to them, especially if you've applied for funding for the exact same project. A narrative description, which we're going to get into, itemized budget and budget justification, any references, and then if you're working with human subjects, you're going to have some sort of approval through IRB, and if you're applying internally to UTEP, a lot of times you need the individualized degree plan, which is the IDP. Okay, so when you're asking for letters of recommendation or support, sometimes they're called letters of support. What does that actually mean? So who are you asking? You need to ask people that can vouch for you in an academic or professional way. Do not ask people that you are related to. No, negative. Now, funny story. Dr. Lou Herman is sitting in that office over there. Dr. Herman and I have worked together for the last 3 years. My name is Luciana Herman. We are not related, like, at all. I know, it's shocking, right? We frequently get emails for each other because our emails are so close together, because I'm Luciana and he's Lou. But he has written me several letters of recommendation, and the first line of his letters are always, I first met Luciana in fall of 2019 when she started at UTEP to establish, okay, I know the name looks funny, but we don't actually share blood. So again, that's a really important, it's really important to get people that are not related to you. And even if it seems as though they could be, it's really important to establish to whomever is reading your packet that you really aren't related. So you should definitely ask people who are academic or professional in nature. So you should ask them professionally. You need to make contact with them. Do not text them, right? Don't put it in a Teams chat. Yeah, are you asking for letters of recommendation right now, right? Oh, you were. Oh, that's good. Through Teams? Do you know, hey, hey man, I'm applying for this thing. No, dear Dr. So-and-so, or dear Mrs. So-and-so, or dear Mr. So-and-so, whatever. You want to be professional, or you can call them, or here's shocking, you can go ask in person. Now that COVID is done doing its COVID for right now, COVID-y thing. You need to provide them a choice, right? Asking them to write on your behalf is just that. It's an ask. It's not a tell, right? You need to be able to give them the option to say, I don't think that I would be a good person. A student, I also an instructor here at this institution, and a student whom I taught while she was an undergrad emailed me a few weeks ago and asked me to write a letter of recommendation for her. She's now in graduate school at a different institution for a graduate scholarship. And I respectfully told her, I said, you know what, I really don't think that, and it was no qualms with the student. She did great work in my class, but I had her as a sophomore. She's now in graduate school. I said, I'm really not the best person to speak on your behalf because I don't know your level of commitment to graduate work. I haven't seen you as a graduate student. How I know you, what I would be able to put in this letter is, oh, when she was an undergraduate student in my, first year composition class, this is the level of work I saw from her. People in graduate school don't care about that. They want to know how you are right now. So I just told her, I said, I don't think I wish you well, but I think you should probably ask a graduate instructor. She emailed me back, she's like, oh my gosh, that's great, thank you. I didn't think of that. She got somebody to write on her behalf. But again, the way that I know her wasn't conducive to the ask that she had brought to me. So you're going to want to give as much information about the opportunity as possible, because when students ask me to write them a letter, the first thing I say is, well, what are you applying for? Like, yeah, I can write you a letter of recommendation to continue to be awesome, but like, what are you applying for? How do you see yourself fitting into this situation? What are you going to use this money for? Why do you need it? Or why do you want it? I never asked why you need it, but why do you want it? Why do you want to have this line on your CV? Right? So then the secondary part of that is giving like a one-pager or even an up-to-date resume to your recommender that even highlights, like sometimes when I send things and I ask a professor to write me something, I will send a CV, but I'll actually highlight in it, hey, this is what this experience that I have works with this particular opportunity. Because the more, anybody can write a form letter. You can Google form recommendation letter, and it's like, dear so-and-so, I recommend Susie Q for this grant because she is a great person, signed Professor X, right? Not Professor X, I realized what I just did there. Yeah. But the more personal your letter, the better, because what's the point of a letter of recommendation? What's the point? Why do people ask for that? Like, why do funders and agencies, why do they ask for letters of recommendation? Anybody have any idea?
Because they want someone in authority who can vouch for you.
Yeah, so it's definitely to vouch for you. What else does a letter of recommendation do that the information you provided doesn't do? Yeah, it gives like a more complete picture, right? So I can tell you how amazing I am. I can show you what I've done. But letters of recommendation also give that humanist side of what is helpful to round out the picture of the applicant. So this person was in my class and was able to do graduate level work, presented on this topic and did so with passion and did everything they were asked to do. And, you know, and there's that extra level of detail. You also need to explain the deadlines and submission procedures. Sometimes letters of recommendation aren't actually letters. Sometimes they are some sort of form, like fillable form. So after you've conversed with them and said, hey, I'm applying for the ACS Mellon Fellowship. And they say, okay, great, yeah, I will serve as a recommender for you. You say, okay, well, you know, ACS Mellon is going to send you a link. What email do you want me to provide? So then it cues them in like, oh yeah, I'm probably gonna have to check this email for ACS Mellon. Because sometimes those links are only good for 30 days or what have you, and they have to go in and they have to fill it out. Sometimes they'll say it needs to be on letterhead. So the person will have to actually write it, print it out, sign it, and then scan it back in. Sometimes they're finicky about that. It just depends. If in the event that it is a snail mail letter, it is on you to provide a stamped envelope. An addressed stamped envelope, so that all the person has to do is fold up the letter and put it in the mail. It's just a kind thing to do. They should contextualize how they know you and in what capacity. They should speak to your ability to complete the proposed work. Are you proposing that you move across the ocean for 2 years to do research? You're going on a dinosaur dig in Cairo. I'm making this up. So they need to be able to tell the people who are going to give you money that you have the capacity to do that work and how they know that. Not just like, yeah, I think she'd probably be cool. She'd be okay. I think she could camp for a while. She, you know, she doesn't like to shower, so that's like, that's right up there. No, like you want them to really sell you. And then give specific examples, like I said, giving that more humanist side. When should you ask? The earlier the better. At least 3 months out would be, if it's possible. Do not ask a recommender ever inside of 1 week. It is really, it's a bad look for everybody. Because also that may end up going into your letter. I would have written a better letter if I would have known about this sooner.
I had a situation where they gave me 1 week, like, it was not a scholarship, it was a situation where people gave.
Oh,
me
like the funder gave you 1 week?
No, it was not a funding, it was a different thing, but they gave me 1 week to come up with 3 letters.
Now that's different. So if that particular type deadline is coming to you from whomever you're applying to, that's different. If if me as an applicant said, oh yeah, I need this in a week, that's on me, right? You don't ever want to do that. If you can help it, you shouldn't do it. But I understand what you're saying. Sometimes they'll ask you just for references too. They'll just ask for like contact information so that they can call if needed. Yeah.
For me was the opposite. My advisor asked me, oh, Anna, please, I think a friendly reminder. I mean, I asked for the letter, recommendation letter, like 2 weeks before the deadline. It was very small grant, for a travel grant.
Okay.
And it was not.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a short, a small application.
Yeah.
And he asked me to send him a friendly reminder a couple of days. Earlier, I was like, no. No, of course, I didn't. But yeah, I was like in a rush, and after all that work, yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then always give an if you can, give a deadline in advance of when you need the letter. So if you know that your application deadline is due or May 1st, don't tell them that it's due May 1st. Tell them it's due April 25th. Right? Because we're human too, like, well, I'm saying me as on behalf of all recommenders, right? It's busy, especially like right now, it's the end of the semester and you guys are scrambling. I'm scrambling, the instructors are scrambling, everybody's scrambling. And I wish I could say it's only the end of the semester when it happens, but we know life happens, right? So those friendly reminders of, I just wanted to let you know, especially if it's one of those links that comes from an outside person, that's okay. You know, hey, I haven't gotten confirmation. I just wanted to check in and see if you're still able to serve as a recommender. Right? So there are ways for you to be kind of prodding, but also like about it. Okay. Any questions about letters of recommendation? Nope. Okay, cool.
I just want to underscore what you said about give them as much information about the opportunity and why you're applying as possible. In my experience, most faculty are used to writing recommendation letters for very particular things, whether it's, you know, students applying for graduate school. A lot of professors, you know, maybe they work with National Science Foundation funding, or maybe they work with National Institutes of Health funding, and never the twain shall meet, right? Like they're probably, or like, you know, a lot of times in the humanities, you'll see, you know, they're, you know, they've written for very particular types of funding sources. So if you're not applying for one of those very typical types of funding sources, like say you're applying for American Association of University Women, you want them to know what the mission is and how you think you fit that mission and why you're applying for it. And basically you want to set them up to be successful. I found that it's a best practice to never assume that they intuitively know what you're applying for.
Yeah. And then sometimes they'll want to borrow your language too. Like Jen said, tell them why you fit in there. That will help them go, oh, well, this student fits the mission in that she's able to do X, Y, and Z. And that's an okay thing. Help them write your letter.
Don't
Okay.
write it for them.
Don't write it for them.
Don't write it for them, even if
But-
they ask you,
Yeah.
but like give them bullet points.
Yeah.
Well,
Or you,
several, yeah, they're like, write it
I, for
and
me,
send.
I read and edit it and just say.
Don't write your own letter for a couple of reasons. It's a big ethical problem. It's also, students don't write letters of recommendation. Y'all don't know what you're doing, no offense. So like, it's not necessarily going to be a strong letter. I think a lot of times the way you can get around that is giving them as much information as possible. So like when I've had a faculty member say to the student, oh, you just write it for me. And the student comes to me and they're like, dude, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm like, neither am I. So what I want you to do is give them like a bulleted list
Yeah.
of like what this is.
so you give
and
them
why
like
you
a
did it.
one pager, a description
yes.
of what you, and what you've done in relationship to the
Well,
project. Yeah.
the specific instruction is write a draft and
Mhm,
send it.
yeah.
But I guess- Yeah, no, that's
the
still-
next time you need a letter and they tell you the same thing, and or you send them this bullet and then the next time they're like, oh no, sorry, I can't help you. You know,
I've never had a student send the bulleted list and have a faculty member come back and say, I won't write the letter. Like they
no, but the
really,
next time that you need a letter, they're gonna say, well, I told you, you know, they're gonna remember, they told you to do something, you didn't do it, you sent something else that they did not ask for. You understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah,
I do, but it's never been an issue is what I'm saying. Like I've worked with hundreds of graduate students, okay? I've never had a professor come back and be like, this isn't good enough, write the letter yourself, right? Like them asking you to write, even if you've already done it, right? I've had students come to me and be like, oh shit, I wrote the letter myself last time, should I have done that? And I'm like, no. They're doing it out of a desire to want to best represent you and the opportunity. But what they're not realizing is y'all are not to a point in your career yet where you're writing lots of recommendation letters. So it's ethically slippery and it's also not going to be the best letter. So like, I guess I just want to reassure you, I've never had a student go to their advisor, give them the one pager and have the advisor come back and say, I won't do this, right? Like, they just want reassurance that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, but I'm just like thinking, okay, they tell me to write it. And I, instead of doing the draft as they say, you know, I do a bullet. Okay, maybe they might go ahead and use that point.
But then they're, you're saying they're gonna carry over,
You know,
yes.
they're gonna be like, well, No, I can't do it because of.
Yeah, I'm just saying I haven't encountered that scenario. I don't know, has this happened to you actually, or are you anticipating
No, I
it
always
might?
write the draft.
Oh, okay. Well, and I have to just be honest with them and be like, this is ethically problematic. I talk to my advisor. I won't work with students if I know that they're writing their own letters. I don't know if you are that.
I haven't gotten to, I've
Yeah,
never
it's
had
against,
that.
it's against the code of ethics for my profession. So it's like, you can work on that application yourself if you want to write your own letter, but if you want my help. So, I mean, you'll just have to navigate it as it comes, I think, but I haven't seen it be that problematic.
Well, let's move on to narrative description
Yes,
so we can
sorry.
get, no, it's okay, so we can get to our workshop time. So narrative descriptions are just that. They are descriptions about what you want to do and why you want to do it. They include SMART goals, or not SMART goals. They include elements of smartness, which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So you want to be as specific as possible if you can, right? So some of these fellowships you're applying for potentially are to fund graduate study. Are you going to know the ins and outs of everything you're going to learn and how you're going to apply that specifically in the future? No, not necessarily, but you can give a frame. You can paint a picture. I kind of think of it as like a Bob Ross movie. There's no mistakes, just happy accidents, right? So like you can kind of grab the frame of, I am going into this field because I feel this calling, because I want to do this thing. I want to go into higher education. I want to go into industry. I want to be a biomedical researcher. I think I want to do this, this, and this. I see myself in this way, right? So they answer what you want to do, how you're going to do it, why you want to do it, when, where, and with whom. Okay, so it gives the 5 W's and the H. Really, really important that you kind of include all of that stuff and you paint as much of a picture as possible. Because typically, unless it's a really big national award, you're not going to get a phone call or an interview all the time to answer these questions. So you're going to want to do it here. Okay. Another common component, specifically if you're applying for, this is more towards like a research project or a research trip or professional development opportunity, is an itemized budget and a budget description. So an itemized budget is just that, it's a table, right? It is visually compliant so that people can see, oh, this person is asking for this much money to fund this particular material or experience, and everything goes on here, right? So this is train tickets, plane tickets, hotel stays, technology, but it has to fit within the scope of what they will fund as well. So sometimes funders will say, we will give you money, but you cannot use it for this, 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 and this. Okay, well, then don't put the things that they can't fund. You can't spend their money on stuff that they won't give you, okay? So then your budget justification is another narrative. It's written in like actual prose form where you're explaining who's involved, what is needed, why is it needed, and then this is really important, how you're going to care for the items. How are you inventorying these items? What actually happens? How are you storing them? How are they maintained? Even if, like, say you're asking for money for travel, okay? So what is the item that's being inventoried or cataloged? Maybe it's travel, maybe it's your time to go to this conference, maybe it's, I'm trying to think what else you would use for travel. Maybe there's materials involved, but you're going to use those materials on site, therefore they will get used up. So then how are they stored or maintained? Well, what's maintained is the knowledge that you gain, okay? And then what are you going to do with the resources upon completion of the project? Sometimes that's, I will provide you with a report of how this project helped me in my professional development, okay? So that's also included in things like budget justifications, because a lot of people think, oh, I have to write a budget. That's for all the pens that I'm going to use. We have a lot of pens on this campus. Please don't buy pens. Don't ask anybody money for pens. We have so many pens. By the way, you should take these with you because they're excellent pens. They're study buddy pens. Look at this. It's a pen. And
There's no way to,
what?
there's no way to.
Oh. And a highlight.
And you make me feel bad for getting off track, and you're explaining the features of the pen.
Yeah,
But
great.
I'm here for it.
Okay.
I'm here for it.
So,
I
but
should have
some,
bought mine.
well, there you go. But there are some people who don't think that the non-tactile are resources that you can spend money on. But yes, knowledge, time, those are things that need to be in your budget justification as well. Okay, so anybody have any questions about that? Chat or anything?
The question in the chat, we did have a question about some of the designation of pivot.
Yes.
So
Like my submission was, what does it mean?
Which one?
Like, my submission, so I need to.
in pivot, there's one thing that says limited submission.
Oh, limited submission, okay, so limited submission is when, it's not necessarily something you're going to have to pay too much attention to, but sometimes there's, a funder will say, only 1 or 2 people from one institution can apply to this. That's called a limited submission. So it's not as common for individuals as it is for, when departments are applying for funding for big grants and things like, for instance, at the graduate school, we wrote a big grant as a department. And there was another department that was also writing a grant to the same funder, but it was in a different kind of area of study. So we were the 2 that got to apply this year because we had to pitch to the university like, hey, let us apply. But yeah, as an individual submission, you typically don't have to worry about that unless the funder says only so many from your institution or your area or whatever can apply. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that though. Okay, so with that, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I did want to reaffirm our new share. That this is my email address and the University Library Writing, or the University Writing Center is right here in the library, and you can explore their website to make an appointment or to learn about what they do and how they do it. And then once you have finished finding your funding opportunities, you are going to want to log your NOI with the grad school. So you are going to want to go to the grad school website, to the external funding page, or click the link that's going to be in the slides that we send you with the satisfaction survey. So when you, or the program survey, when you get the survey, I will send it out to you later on today. I will include the PDFs of the slides and all the PDFs of all the handouts that I gave today, which you received many of them by email earlier this week. But if nobody has any questions, I want to thank you for your time and attention today.